Hi, I'm Adam Luke.
Hi, I'm Judy, and we are two licensed marriage family therapists.
The SessionWell podcast was created for pre-licensed clinicians, licensed clinicians, and the everyday Joe. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, welcome back to the SessionWell podcast. My name is Adam Luke. I have amazing co-host
Judy,
and we have a pretty cool guest on today's show. I was thinking about it earlier, how I met her. And I met her one evening at Hope International University. I think it was one of the first classes she was teaching. And if you've ever been an adjunct professor, not everything is always set up for you when you walk in on that first day. And so I remember we were trying to search for certain things, but she was just so kind and graceful. And I'm just happy to have her on the podcast. So who are you, guest?
I am Lilia Carey.
Yeah.
or as some call me, Dr. Lilia.
Dr. Lilia. No, and she's got an awesome Instagram if you guys ever get the chance, which is Dr. Lilia for Change on Instagram. She's got some good stuff on there.
Thank you.
Well,
Lilia.
Thank you for having me, guys. First of all, let me just start off with that. I truly enjoy you guys. I think it's been probably one of the greatest blessings in having the opportunity to be at Hope and meet some really just not only wonderful clinicians, but really just solid, good, people to throw thoughts around and touch base and learn and grow. And I think that's the part that's pretty great. So thank you.
You are more than welcome. No, I can't wait to sit down and have this conversation with you because when we have a guest come in and sit down on this podcast, we like to have that guest sort of say, hey, what's in your sphere of influence? What are the things that you're seeing? Let's title something. Let's go off of it. And as always, Lilia comes in swinging, and she put the title out as Holding Space for Others While Navigating Our Own Space as a Therapist. And immediately I started to feel defensiveness. The resistance was strong. Like, okay, let's have this conversation.
Yeah, I think when you guys reached out, I thought, what's something that is a common piece? And being an adjunct professor, I'm a supervisor at a clinic. I have my own private practice that I work with. Oftentimes what I hear is, and I feel it myself, like, where do we go when we're in the middle of stuff, and how do we interact? And, sometimes I hear newer therapists coming on and feeling like they haven't found their system of support. They haven't found their pillars. And it's hard when you're trying to navigate, like, how to be this person that's helping others while still sorting out, your own life in the process.
Yeah, because we're human too, and it's like, how do we help other people when, like, our lives are falling apart, or like, we're in the middle of something, or like we were all in a pandemic this last year, and I think that was the first time where a lot of therapists are talking about, like, how do we navigate something that for our clients that we've never navigated ourselves.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was trying to think of a time where we were facing the exact same experience that the client is experiencing. And in 20 years, I have not had that experience. I imagine that that's probably what happened, 9/11, in communities where there's been, significant shootings or just these very traumatic events. And they're affecting you personally, but at the same time, they are something that you're having to manage or create that room for the client or even your peers. So much is going on right now that I think it pulls us all in different directions. And like you said, we're human. We still feel, we still leave and feel tapped out. And I know for myself, there's times where I think, is this really, am I still in a place to be able to do this?
Yeah. In the way that you were explaining it, something that popped into my mind was, I feel like when we sit down with other clinicians, it's something that I hear more commonly is when people say, hey, what do you specialize in? And you start off with, well, trauma. And they're like, ooh, like, and then immediately they sort of recoil and they're like, yeah, I refer those clients away. I think Hope's different in the way that like most of that clinical community that we've got there, we're all very trauma informed.
Mhm.
And we really work out of that basement of trauma affects pretty much everything we do in life if we don't take care of it. And I think that this pandemic was that moment where it brought trauma across the board, because it didn't matter if you didn't lose your job significantly changed, especially for therapists. We used to be able to hold physical space, and for a while that wasn't maybe the safe thing to do, or our clients didn't feel like they could do that, and so we had to switch to teletherapy. Or maybe I didn't lose a family member, but I'm sitting with a client who's just lost four,
Yeah.
you know, and all of a sudden the big T word, trauma, entered all of our lives, and it was globally, because there was so many shifts, and sometimes our pillars were broken. We lost community support systems. I was working substance abuse at the time at a residential facility, and I was hearing about AA and NA groups shutting down. And there was a period in LA County where for I think it was 2 months, there was no meetings other than Zoom. And so you had just massive amounts of relapse because people lost their homes, lost family members, lost their community, and they didn't have any of those pillars. It was just so eye-opening, to sit back and realize trauma came in any way it could. It was almost like you couldn't have a watertight case. It was going to find its way in.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think you talk about specialties, and I've been working with the sexual abuse population for the last, I don't know, over 17 years. And I was really concerned about my staff. I was really concerned about, we already work with what I call the underbelly of humanity.
Yeah.
And that's a capital T with all the kids. And then you add this on top of it. So it's this complexity that started to play out. And we would do on average about 350 clinical hours. And the first month we shut down, we were doing close to 600 hours of clinical care. We never left the office. We came in, we all wore masks, we all were very protective. But it started to really kind of take a toll, I think, in terms of our empathy on the outside world, because we would see all these people hurting, and on top of it, you have all their fears and stuff, and then you have to regulate your own, fearfulness, and your own teeth start to tap in. And how can I, if my fuse is going shorter and shorter, how do I have the space for my peer who's coming to me and saying, I have a headache, or I don't feel well? And, one of the things I heard a lot was, I'm going through it too, as if there was this space of, we couldn't understand that the duality existed. You were going through it and I'm going through it. And right now I'm going to support you.
Yeah.
And then I may have to tap in. And if I don't have a pillar, I need to go find one. And I think that's one of the beautiful things I've seen in the social media at Hope, is the amount of reaching out of colleagues and peers, and just a phone call where you're like, I'm going to drop some F-bombs. I'm a little frustrated. I'm overwhelmed. Can I just say that so I could plug back in and go back doing what we really enjoy and love, which is, to be present for people that need us.
Absolutely.
I think the fear part was something that was huge, because we're dealing with our own clients that have their own fears and their anxieties, but then we go home or we go to the grocery store or we talk to our friends, and it's like, well, I don't even know what this pandemic is. Like, what is this virus? How do we social distance? Like, who lives in my home? And then so many of us had to start seeing clients like via telehealth, but like in our own space at home. And some of us, our homes aren't set up for that. Or some, like for you guys went into the office, and then you guys had to come back into your own homes, and who else is living with you. And I just think the fear across the board was so hard to contain, because we have our own anxieties, but our clients are seeking help for us to help them. And so I'm like, I don't know my coping mechanisms. I can tell you what good coping mechanisms are, but like, what are mine? Like, I don't know. Yeah. And so that was really hard this past year.
Well, and I think, you're keying into a word where I think when we look at this holding of space, it's interesting because I think none of us as adults like to say we're scared. None of us like to say we're afraid. We'll call it everything and anything under the book, right? I'm having, I think I'm, kind of struggling a little bit. This is an off day. I'm tad overwhelmed. Like,
I'm nervous.
It's a difficult season.
this will be passing, this is just a transition. And I sit there, I'm like, yeah, no, I think we're afraid.
Yeah.
I think we're afraid. And I think if we just go down to that root key component, then I know what to do with it a little bit. But you said something beautiful. I don't think a lot of us knew what our own coping. We, as clinicians, we are taught to really expand our bandwidth of what we can hold. And we have been taught that we hold here and then we go to work and we hold there. And one of the beauties of being trained is that we learn how to compartmentalize. This did not let you compartmentalize.
No. Because it was everywhere.
Yeah, pardon me?
Because it was everywhere. It was it was at work, it was at home, it was with our friends, it was on social media. Like it was like, how do I compartmentalize this fear of a virus that we're not aware of? And you keep hearing these numbers, or there's just also like disagreements or controversies. I would say last year too, aside from the fear too, there was just I don't know, it was so divisive. And so there was like the election, there was racial tensions, there was the coronavirus. Now I would say like there's vaccines. So it's just like, how do we hold space for our clients that come in with this, and then also maybe ask us where our personal stance is? And so how do we hold space for that when maybe we don't even know?
I think that's probably one of the things in teaching I tell our students all the time is that it is a safe thing to say, I don't know, but I'm willing to find out for you. I'm not sure, but I need to find out, or I may not have the answers, but there's a lot of people out there that do. And I think we need to sort out what that answer is. But not putting, going back to that space, not putting additional pressure on you that somehow you're supposed to know it all. Everyone you spoke to, it's now you're a therapist and you hold it together all the time. So now your family and your friends and everybody's like saying to you, and then you're like, I'm not holding it. I'm not there.
It's funny. You say that, and I think about like busting out the cards of my friends. So Lilia's good at this. Judy's good at this. You can call them. They'll take care of you. Because I think when you're talking about the compartmentalization, the fact is we couldn't keep up with it because it was like stacking boxes. Because it was truly overwhelming that, again, in every facet of your life, you were somehow impacted by this. As clinicians, sometimes, I was talking to another gentleman that we work with, Mitch Pohl, that he was once saying like, well, you can go to work, you can do your clinical stuff, and then you have that drive home to turn back into who you are, all that good stuff, sort of go back to your own space. Well, you couldn't
take off the layers,
exactly, and at the same time, you can't do it anymore because you still walk out of that therapy space and then you walked into the grocery store and there was nothing in the grocery store. Like there's panic in different spaces and you are always reminded it's on the radio, it's in everything that you're hearing about. And so because so encompassing in your life. And I think that was the other thing is a lot of people realized that we were using all of our social like the resources as distractions in our lives. I mean, come on, we could go to the bar, we could go to a show, we could go see a concert. We had all these things that we were able to do to make life manageable, and then all of a sudden they're gone.
And I think going back to Judy, that was our coping, right?
Yeah.
Like I can't, so I'm gonna go to take my kid to Disneyland. Like I was Disneyed out, but it was like, let's go, girl. Like we're gonna go get you some popcorn and we're gonna people watch and it's gonna pretend like the world's not there, and then we plug back in.
Right.
And
that's
going
to the gym. Like going to the gym was, or like going for a walk, or just doing something like that was a normal coping mechanism that we would suggest, but like we couldn't go to the gym. We couldn't go to Disneyland. We couldn't go to the movie theaters.
Or you said the walk. I realized, and I don't know about you guys, I picked that up. I'm like, now I'm walking because I need to expel this.
Yep.
So get up every morning, go for a walk. And I realized that there was new rules walking. Do I
Yes.
stay on this
Yes.
side? Do you cross? Do I wear my mask? Do I not wear my mask?
Mhm.
How do you hold space even in an environment that is something you never thought of? I never
Mm,
thought, oh, let me move out of the way. Or there's a school by where I live, so kids were coming, and I'm the adult, so I'm the one that's going to get on the street so that you can stay on the sidewalk.
yeah.
Like those things needed to get navigated, and they weren't anything that anyone talked or taught you.
Yep.
It was like we were all in training wheels again.
Mhm.
And it feels again so disjointing as well, because
Mhm.
sometimes I was raised in the South, so it's always when you're walking down the street, you smile and look at someone in their eyes. And then that was a massive shift with COVID, because again, I think we were all so scared that when you saw a person coming, you like didn't really make eye contact, or you had the mask on so you couldn't see if someone was smiling.
Mhm.
And there's this natural fear of like, well, I don't want to catch this. So like you said, I'm stepping out of the way, or I'm not joining into that same space. And so relationally, we kind of do the same thing through the regular parts of our lives. We start to find ourselves not engaging and withdrawing more.
Something
I
else
think
I thought was interesting was when people would start hanging out with their friends and family, it was almost like, well, if I post about it, am I going to be judged for it? And then should we just
Mhm.
wear our masks to make it appear as if we've been wearing our masks the whole time we've been hanging out with our friends? And so that was, I thought, kind of weird too, because you have clients that come in, they're like, well, I don't know, should I hang out with my friends? I mean, like, what is 6 feet? Like, can it be outside, can it be inside? And then we're sitting here like, I don't know. And then there's some judgment in that as well too. And so that was also really interesting, because you'd see posts and some people would judge it and be like, oh my gosh, that's not 6 feet apart. Were they wearing their masks the entire time they were hanging out, or are they hanging out inside? So it's just kind of, I don't know, I thought that was kind of interesting as well.
I think that's you made a big point in that. I think we turned into our own natural state of humans, which is to start to judge the living daylights out of everything. And as clinicians, we're taught to assess and evaluate for understanding, right? So we're
Mm,
evaluating, we're assessing all the time because we're trying to get to what's the root of it, what's the understanding. We weren't doing it for understanding. We
mm,
for safety. We were doing it out of fear. We were doing it out of defensiveness. And, I found myself spending time with my siblings and then thinking, oh my goodness, I have to explain to somebody else in my family why I was with my siblings and why. And I became very torn that are they going to get their feelings hurt? Because that's not what I wanted to do.
mm,
And I don't want them to feel excluded. And do I show this? Do I not show that? What do I do about it? Because then I became very hyper aware about the people around me because I care for them.
yeah.
Mhm.
And are they going to think I'm doing? Are they going to judge me? Are they going to say
Mm,
like, oh, it's okay to do that, but it's not okay to do that? And then you go in the room and the client's telling you the same thing,
yeah.
and then you're sitting there and you're like, I just became very comfortable with saying, I know it hurts me too.
Mm,
I'm with you. It hurts. I don't have answers. It's a day by day, and if it comes from a good place and you know that your intentions are to
mm,
care for the people around you, I think it's going to sort itself out.
yeah.
But it was having to trust that it was those relationships were solid, that they were going to be
Mm.
okay. And now you're challenging that in the process of, let me keep my stuff here and your stuff there, but oh, I can feel it.
It's funny, I just sort of going into that space with you as you're saying it, like thinking back to all those personal experiences of, again, you did so well in articulating that our fear response, sometimes we jump straight into that shame, guilt, and embarrassment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're not achieving the secondary gain we want. We're not actually getting closer to safety or even closer relationally with that person. What we're doing is we're just pushing people away, largely because we're stuck in a space of I'm scared.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate how you opened this podcast, because you highlighted the fact that as clinicians, sometimes we feel like we're unable to say we're scared, or we're unable to say I don't know. And then when I reflect on some of those best moments in like building therapeutic rapport, it's when you've sat with a person and you say, I don't have all the answers, I have no idea. Because it would be arrogant and ignorant of me to say that I do. And I know why you experienced an atrocity in your life or a massive loss. No, that's a beautiful and scary thing about life, is we don't always understand it fully. We try, we assess our best, but even in assessing, we have to make sure that we're not being neurotic in how we do it.
When I think in adding to that, I found myself really kind of advocating for my clients, for my students, for my peers, this idea that, we're all going through this challenge and it's an obstacle and we're going to learn from it, but really trying not to allow ourselves to feel that victimization that then feeds more of that fear. It wasn't done to any of us particularly. It wasn't done to hurt Judy or Adam or any of our friends or colleagues. It occurred, it happened. And I think when we got in, I started to see a lot of clinicians suddenly saying, I need to do something else. I was blessed in that my work did not get impacted aside from more work. But it wasn't the same for others. And I need a brand and I need a hustle. And how am I going to get things done? And I need to now create this new space. And oh, wait, all this world stuff is happening and we need to include that. And then you saw the clinicians kind of, but this is what I'm going to do. And this is what you're going to do. And I almost thought like, we need to be just okay knowing that we do what we do because that's our career choice. That's our path. We're going to help people. And I started getting worried about like the constant hustle that felt like it was being imposed upon. And I'm like, we're all having a really hard time. Like, give yourself some space. Give yourself a little bit of compassion. It's okay.
Yeah.
It is okay.
I remember like when the pandemic first hit and everything shut down and we were mandated to do telehealth. I remember just being like, oh my gosh, because everyone, I'm like I would say at that time I had probably like 12 clients. I would say maybe 10 of them just stopped coming. And so that like killed my practice. So I started feeling like, oh my gosh, one, I was embarrassed because I'm in a group practice. And so you can see everyone's calendar and mine's like zero, like nobody's in the calendar. And so I was like, okay, I have to hustle. And then, so I literally signed up for like all these webinars or workshops online that taught you how to do telehealth with kids and teens. And, cause back then, like Zoom wasn't a thing like before this last year. Like, what the heck is Zoom? And so learning that and then trying to hustle and try to start like an online group support group for adolescents. It was so much like out of who I am, but like it was because out of panic and fear of like, what am I going to do with my practice? And then you see all these people raving about, oh, well, my caseload is full. All my clients came with me. They're all fine. Online therapy is great. So it was kind of a process in the beginning of like, what do I do here? And it was hard for me not to compare myself to other therapists, especially during a pandemic. I mean, it's really hard not to compare in regular life, like comparing caseloads, but then now just like in a pandemic was like, oh my gosh, what do I do?
I get teased a lot because I'm called the, eternal optimist. I'm like,
oh, see, I'm a realist.
It's going to be okay. It's going to be, I feel it. I know it, And they're like, yeah, no, Lil, it's not. And I'm like, no, it will. You just. So I say that because you're absolutely right. I found myself telling people all the time, and I'm like, it has to be authentic that I feel this. But I kept saying like, we're going to sort it out. It's going to get sorted out. I don't know how.
Yeah.
But it's going to get sorted out. And like you said, Adam, it was like, you take this and this person can take that. And I lost people, and I had clients who said, I won't do telehealth. I'm not comfortable with that. That feels weird to me. But then the other thing was that they weighed on my heart. Like, am I not serving them? Am I not like, how do I do that? Or we went to telehealth at our clinic, and suddenly all of us had to do research on how do you do sexual abuse in a safe
Mm,
place. And let me tell you, some of the best research came from Native American telehealth services. I learned
mm,
more about how they've been doing telehealth for a long time in these rural communities,
yep.
and it really expanded.
Hmm.
But like you said, all of a sudden now there's this additional workload of I need to learn and I need to adapt and I need to, oh, by the way, did I tell you I'm really scared? You
Yeah.
know, just in case anybody wanted to know.
Yeah. I'm about to lose my stuff. Like, well,
That's a nice way to put it.
yeah, no. Okay, yeah. We'll put a warning on lose my shit. But really it was crazy because I think also clinical professionals, we got so ingrained with the idea of who we are as a therapist. And so I think a lot of people conceptualize like that picture of a wingback chair and you're there with your notepad and please tell me more.
And my glasses.
Yeah, exactly. And like you have your diffuser in the background or whatever it might be, right? And then all of a sudden it was like, well, wait a second. I feel more like Geek Squad, like I'm doing IT support and trying to get people to like unmute, like, or
Can you hear
join
me?
with audio. I mean, I used to have signs and I'd be like, join with audio. And so there were things that you had to do. And I remember sitting down with other clinicians, especially at the facility I was working at, that they're like, man, I don't feel like I'm a therapist anymore. I feel like, and it's like, let's step out of that process for a second. You still have impact. If you didn't have impact, you wouldn't have a client load. And you still have people coming, even if it's only 2 people and you used to have 12. People are still coming. You are still making an impact and affecting change in people's life. But you might have to accept that it's going to look a little more different for a
Yeah.
while. And I truly hope with that eternal positivity aspect that hopefully clinicians realize that we can fill multiple gaps now, that we
Mhm.
don't have to have this cookie cutter mold. When this whole thing started off, I switched my private practice over to virtual, 100% virtual. And I don't know when I'm going to go back to in person because I keep sort of tapping my clients like, do you guys want to meet in person? Because I have California, I have a practice, and Tennessee, I have a practice. California, obviously, I'm not going to fly in. We'll be
Uh-huh.
virtual. Yeah, maybe monthly. I don't know. We'll find out. But for like my Tennessee clients, they're no, I'm fine with virtual. It actually works out better for me. I feel like we also found out that there's this niche available to where all of a sudden the accessibility of therapy is much greater, because I love it when the fact of when I sit down with parents that are my clients, that when things come up like, oh, Billy's got baseball or whatever it happens, guess what? I'm doing therapy in parking lots,
Mhm.
like while the kid's in batting practice, like whatever it is, all of a sudden people don't have to give up that support system.
I think you're saying that, and the thought that came in my mind was, so I'm a bilingual therapist. So I do a lot of therapy in Spanish. And one of the things I love about Spanish is that your tone, your affliction, all the way that you speak really conveys. And there's so many terms that allow you to create a very colorful experience where you build that connection. And it was good to do that with some of our Latino clients. Like, you could do it with the tone, or even if you were having a phone session, you could do it that way. But with myself, I use my hands a lot, I use my face a lot. And that mask, I was like, do they really understand? Are they going to read my tone? Can they read my body language? So there was accessibility to a whole nother world. And then I was like, how do I learn this new skill of building relationships with just my
Mm,
voice,
Mhm.
with not all the visual stuff that goes with it? And you say, you can have clients everywhere. Like, it was awesome. I could be like, pardon me, I'm going to go take a client. And then I'd, scoot into another room and
yep.
you'd set it up. And I loved that about it.
Hmm.
And then there was that other part where I'm like, oh, did that sound, or how's that? And I just found myself like now spinning about how do I convey empathy and when they're sad, and what are the words I'm going to use? And so then there was this other thing that kind of, was building. So I was like, it's so cool because I learned all this stuff. And that's where I come back to all of us, new and old clinicians. I keep saying, like, we did this, we're doing this, and we made a whole bunch of skills on top of it. Like, we're amazeballs.
We're changing the title. Amazeballs. Here we are.
But I think that's why when I decided to do this whole, like, Dr. Lilia for change, I really think that's what it is. Like, we forget that things can change, and we tell little people that all the time. It's going to change and it's going to be okay, but we don't say that to ourselves.
No.
That's true. No.
Man, no, that one rang a bell within me, because I have I can really, in my own personal life, I can feel like my temporary stressors are permanent. Like, I can start doing my map of my life off of whether it's the financial stressors or family stressors or whatever it might be. All of a sudden it's like, man, how do you get to the house? How do you get to your kids? How is this going to be? Oh, struggle bus. Well, it's not necessarily like that, because if I'm in that therapy space, all of a sudden I'm like, we got to have opportunity, and we have to have space for change, and we have to have all this stuff. And then in my own life, I can really invite that hypercritical negative voice and that rigid cognitive sort of scope of, this is where it's going to be for life. And the truth is, no one has that amount of control in their life. Life is going to change whether you want it, whether it's positive or negative. And we can find a ton of hope in that, because even when it's a really tough season of life, the good news is the sun's going to come up tomorrow, and things may change. And things will change. It just, sometimes it's not going to be on the timeline that you're hoping it be on.
Right. And kind of touching on what you just said too, Adam, like, how do we hold space for clients when we are in our own struggles? Like, how do I do couples therapy and then do that when I just got in a fight with my husband? Or one of the recent ones I had was, I'm like seeing some new moms as well. And because I'm a new mom, and I'm trying to tell these moms, like, oh, like, ask for help and, do self-care. And then I come back home and I'm like, what's happening? Like, I don't ask for help. I just, or I have no self-care. And so even this morning I was like, okay, like, baby is with my husband and my in-laws. I'm like, I'm going to relinquish control. And the only reason I said that was because I told my clients yesterday, you need to, let them help you, let go of the control. And I'm like, why is it so easy for me to tell someone else to do it? But then how do we hold space for that when we're struggling in our own space at home?
I took a word out of my vocabulary, and I'm gonna talking about that space thing. And I realized every time I said I'm gonna need a self-care, it turned into another task. And then I wasn't doing that anymore. It was like, oh, I didn't check off that box. Like, darn it, But I started to say, I just need to regenerate. It's like a lizard. You chop off its little tail. God, I don't want any lizards getting hurt. There was no lizards hurt in this podcast. But their tail grows back, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And they regenerate. And I realized, like, that's the amazing part of who we are. We really can regenerate. And I think you're saying, like, how do we do that? Because you're right. I've been with my husband for over 28 years, and I have a little 9-year-old who is way more precocious than I ever bargained for. And there's days where those things are heavy on us, and you're struggling and you're challenging, and you're right. Like, how do you do that? And a lot of it is saying, like, I too deserve that space. I too get to just pause. I don't think we pause enough.
What you're really highlighting there is the fact that we forget the power of role modeling. Like, I can sit here and I can tell you till I'm blue in face, these are the things you need to be doing. But then why can't I also show you that I apply those in my own life by taking space? I mean, I realized that during when the pandemic was happening and it just started to shut down. I mean, I remember my employer giving me a letter that said, if you ever get stopped by the police, you're going to need to show this letter so that you can get to work. And that's when like all of a sudden, you know, being a fan of apocalyptic movies was no longer fun, because it's like, is this gonna be like Book of Eli every morning? Like I gotta, like, what is this? But I was forgetting like what you were saying, like self-care. What is self-care? And self-care isn't just like, well, read a book so you can sound smarter, because it doesn't sound like self-care. That sounds like, again, obligation. I'm doing this for, it doesn't sound like I'm doing it to recharge, to feel relaxed. What are the things? And I remember my wife and I coming to the conclusion that there was, on the weekends, while most of our family and friends had all been at home all week, she was working for a pharmaceutical company, so she was going in every day as well. What we did was, on the weekends, we just shut down. The weekends we would come home and it would be 2 days of being in a house. And it was largely us relaxing and trying to get sleep and trying to share space together, because we were stressed out with everything that was going on.
I had to get a lot better at saying, you know, today was a rough day, or I am here. I needed to, self-care for me was to acknowledge my own experience
Yeah.
and then render that to those around me, you know, being able to tell my spouse or my kid, you know, mom's grumpy today. I'm not really sure what it is. It's not you. I can tell you
Yeah.
that. But I'm grumpy. And if I'm being grumpy, you need to, you know, let me know. Or I have amazing sisters, and being able to say to them, if I'm a jerk, tell me,
Yeah.
you know, or, and they're great at telling me, but, you know, or I have this, you know, wonderful circle of friends. And I remember calling one day and saying, I'm driving and I need a call because I am not in a good place.
Yep.
I don't know, but my kid's in the car and I need somebody to take the wheel. And I'm not talking about the tire.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I just need somebody to regroup my head and say, it's okay. It's going to be fine. And I'm going to drop off my kid and this is what you're going to do. And it's going to be A, B, C, and D. Okay. My spouse wasn't available at the time. So I contacted this friend and I did all that. And she said, and then go put on your therapy hat and go be a therapist.
Yeah.
And I knew that hat. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, all right. I'm gonna go. And I think that's the beauty of like ethical codes that we have, where like self-disclosure. And if you have good boundaries, it keeps that distance and you're like, I am fully present. I am here for you. And sometimes it almost was, I think, a little bit of a relief because I could do that. But over there, I wasn't really sure what I was doing.
Yeah.
I think the community, I mean, just being part of Hope, I think the reaching out to your peers, especially like other MFT friends. I mean, like me and Adam, like we do it before, if we like had an off morning or like we get an email that's like not the nicest, or a text from a client, or, you know, just our own stuff, or we have our own family things. Like I know for me, I have like a community of like group texts or individual where I'm just like, dude, I'm not doing well right now, but I have, you know, 5 sessions after this. Like, what do I do? And they just remind you, you know, like, yeah, put on your therapist hat. Like, you got this, you can do it. Let's process here what's going on for you personally. So that way, when you walk into that session, like you are present for those clients. And I think that community has just, I don't know, it has just been so helpful, because without them, like, I don't even know how I would function on some days in session.
Absolutely. You know, and to tie into what Adam was saying, that idea that, you know, you role model by being able to say, you know, I can change. And we do it for our clients every day. That's the premise of psychotherapy, the crux of it.
Yeah.
Relationships matter. And we need to change either ourselves or our perspective or behaviors or feelings to make sense about what is valuable in our lives. And the reality is, I think a lot of us learned that it's our people matter, you know, be it new clinicians or middle clinicians or well-versed, like, I don't really know if that exists. I think it's just they need to grow and develop. But there was a sense of, how am I going to change? And if we have the power of, you know, guiding our clients, and I always say, our clients are their masters of their own lives. We just have the honor of walking with them. And it's our knowledge that guides them. But at the end of the day, it's still their lives. And I think that change that we can instill in them was a huge lesson for many of us as clinicians of, we need to role model that for ourselves. We, we need to pay the bills, but we need to pay ourselves in the process. And if you hunker down or you slow it down, then that's what needs to happen. But that really was my desire, I think, this year with that intentional thought for those around me, is to really raise up. I think we move forward not by stepping on people, but by looking back and bringing them along with you.
Absolutely.
It's in the community of being able to say, you got there, help me up there, and turning over and say, let me help you up where I am. And the community grows and change happens. But it's really hard because sometimes we don't give ourselves that permission, to do change, or to grant what we offer our clients. Somehow we are exempt.
Well, and it's almost like when you were talking about sort of bringing that community with yourself, you had brought up this idea when we were conceptualizing this podcast of insecurity versus competition.
Yeah.
And when we want to get on the pedestal, but we're doing so by stepping on others, again, we're not helping build relationships or even helping our reputation. But when we reach success while elevating others at the same time, all of a sudden we work from, I think we work from not a position of a deficit, because I think that's where a lot of us get locked up, is we're constantly feeling like we're coming from a deficit. And when we work from a surplus of, I'm going to bring people with me, then all of a sudden I'm okay to reach out to people and tell them I'm not perfect, because I'm not maintaining my whole image on that I am perfect. I absolutely love one line that I use with my clients all the time, which is I tell them I can be wrong. Because like they'll say something and you'll be like, I think I'm hearing this. And I'll be like, nope. And I'll be like, you know what? I can always be wrong. I appreciate that honesty. And I remember one kiddo I worked it with was like, because he was having this moment of an adult just said he could be wrong. and it was like, I never even thought of that. Like, no, you're supposed to have all the answers. No. We're still in this. Like, I got more years. I have a little bit of wisdom here, but I'm not perfect. And it's just something I love sharing with that community.
But I do think that you're making this idea about the pedestal and the insecurities and the competition. And there was a wonderful colleague I had the pleasure of meeting out of Canada, and he made this statement, and it's resonated with me. It's something that, it's one of those, I think as clinicians, you make your own personal, biography of how I function. Like, this is my crux of where, the lane that I'm in is labeled as such. And he said, the world is filled with people, he said, and they will always need each of us for what we uniquely offer. And it is okay that you do not do what your peer does, because that's what gives them their space, and this is what gives you your space. Because I may not be the one that works with couples, but I work with, sexual abuse, and a lot of people have a hard time with that. But that's my space that I'm allowed to, and you get to have yours, and we may merge, we can share, and we can grow and change in that process. But we don't all have to feel like it has to be like everybody else. It could be different. It could change. And that's, again, it's okay. One of my favorite lines, I tell clients, speaking of lines, I tell people, who's the who? I always say, one day I'm going to write a book that says, said who? Like, who is this person? I want to meet them, because they come up with a lot of authority. Right. And I don't know if that necessarily applies. Like, who said you couldn't, have this place or be insecure? Like, who said that you suddenly have to be up on this pedestal and it means don't bring others along? I don't think it's said, but you get the vibe, you get that feeling. Like, wait, am I not included in this?
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's this idea of I have to hide my light, right? Like the light of my life, the thing that I come from a background of being a mechanic, welder, all this other good stuff. So I always think of it in craft. Like, I honed in and built years honing myself in for a craft. And then imagine being like, well, I'm really good at this, but I'm not going to tell anyone about it. And I feel
Yeah.
like sometimes therapists, we do the same thing where we have a craft, we have something, like you said, whether it's sexual abuse or it's like it's substance abuse or it's trauma or whatever it might be, we have things that we're naturally good at. We have gifts in it, talents.
Mhm.
And then I don't want to tell too many people because I don't want to have competition. Well, then no one will know your light. No one will know. I know a life coach that uses the word magic. No one will know about your magic because you won't tell anyone because you're afraid that they might hop on. You can only be you and they can only be they. I think of therapy as ice cream. I've always related it that way. Some people are pistachio, some are rocky road, some are vanilla. And there's people that absolutely love vanilla and they don't want anything to do with rocky road. And it doesn't matter if Rocky Road has bigger and better words. They want vanilla. This is
Yeah.
what I want. So stop trying to be pistachio if you're chunky monkey. Like just be
Yeah.
it.
Now I
You
just
know,
want ice cream.
it popped in my head because of something that Judy said earlier. It linked that thought where you said my peers were having all these clients, and then I look at my schedule and it said 0. And here's the optimist in me. The thought I had was, but I bet you were the person that all those therapists went to. So while maybe you weren't helping the clients, I bet your peers knew you had space and they accessed it, and that was your flavor. And sometimes we don't see that, you know, obviously it affects us in other ways financially and things like that, right? But at that moment, it's like I'm feeling inadequate, I'm feeling less than, and yet you may be totally serving up that vanilla ice cream for somebody else because they're not going to be able to serve it themselves.
Mhm.
And it's when we are able to look at things that way, that we're all interconnected and intertwined, that it really builds us. And yeah, maybe this is what I do, but the reality is if you call me and you say, hey, Lil, I have this client and this, and this, my interest is the client. That's why I chose this profession.
Mhm.
It's a very selfish thing. It feels good to help others. And in the process, like, why would I not help my peer who's going to help someone else?
And one thing that I've learned the most, like like just this is my own personal experience, but for me, my private practice, I will always thank and credit my peers because my practice is built on personal referrals. Like Psychology Today is great and stuff, and so is other, online forums. But for me, I just realized that, if my caseload is 0, but yeah, like if I can like sit with another new MFT or like an associate and just be like, hey, like this is like kind of what we've done, and just kind of share whatever our struggles, our knowledge, and not hide it. I've just learned that just built other relationships. And so for me, I have to then realize that my own insecurities was getting in my own way. Just because somebody has 29 clients and I have 3, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a bad therapist.
Yeah.
And I think it ebbs and flows throughout the seasons. And I think the biggest thing is to just not be in competition with other therapists because we're all a community of therapists. And those people, they are your referral sources. Yes, clients are too, but so are other clinicians who can go, oh, like Lilia, like you deal with sexual trauma, and like we'll refer to you. Like Adam, you are really, you work really well with men and children. So okay, we'll go there. And so being in competition really at the end of the day doesn't actually benefit us at all.
It just hurts the community, right?
Yeah.
That's the sad part is when I again sort of what Lilia was saying, I've been blessed to have a community of clinicians around me. I think because of just us all being at Hope, we're always in each other's sphere of influence. But when you step out into the world and you talk to a lot of different clinicians and you ask them like, well, who would you refer to? They don't necessarily have people that they've had personal relationships with. They're like, well, I've heard good things about this person. And it's like, oh, cool. When was the last time you went and like had coffee with some of the people in your area? And they're like, never. And when I first moved to Tennessee, that was one of the first things I started doing was I was going through Psychology Today and finding people like who were working in the area. And I started calling people. And what was, again, frustrating is some people never call you back. And so I'm like, man, imagine if I was a client. But then on the other side, sometimes people don't actually see the value in sitting down and having a cup of coffee. And it's like, okay, well, we as clinicians should have a different community for ourselves. Why can't we encourage each other? Why can't we sort of celebrate and champion one another for when you go from 2 clients to 5 clients? That's something that we've got to bring with ourselves. If again, we're turning around and we're asking our clients to have that awareness to champion and celebrate their own mini victories of the week.
And I say, who I am as a clinician doesn't have to be what you are as a clinician. I sometimes I am hearing things or I see on social media or things like that, and I'll read some of the comments, and I'm like, it's okay that they do it differently. Like we do know that, right? Difference is important. And maybe it's just I may oversimplify, and by all means it's not all roses and stuff like that, but I am always thinking like, there has to be a place where you find, and I tell them, there are students, at Hope, I tell them all the time, find the people with you that are going to be honest with you, and the ones that that they get you, because they're the ones that are going to sit with you and you're going to forge. I still talk to people who, and I graduated from Hope, many moons ago, and I still talk to some of them. And there's some cases where I'm like, hey, this, I know this. Can you walk me through? Or, but it's in, like you said, you reach out. And for me, oftentimes there's a lot of Latino clients that want private practice, and mine is a very small thing, but like you were saying, Judy, everything I've ever had, and I started mine in '06, has always been word of mouth. I'm not on Psychology Today. I'm not on. So I honor my peers. That somebody would say, you have the ability. That to me is a gift, that somebody says, I think help so-and-so. And in turn, I want to offer that when I say, I think Adam's good at this, or Judy's really good at this. Like, that's somebody who I would think that you would want to talk to. And when you have these relationships, I can say, let me tell you why too. They're really cool this way, and they have this, and this just happened, But I think that's what makes therapy, is the idea that I'm comfortable, and vicariously they rely on some of your trust. So building that relationship, or bringing that community with you, is what makes each of us do what our calling is, which is to be in the lives of others when they hurt. I always say that's the gift we have. We can hold people's hurt. That's what being a therapist is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it changes, sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it's a short one. But between change and hurt, like, you just have to be able to say, I can't do that. And I know somebody who can. But if we don't make those links, then, are we really doing any good for the person in front of us? If, I think sometimes that's also a hard thing to decide. Like, it doesn't mean I'm inadequate. It means they're skilled, and their skill takes nothing away from mine. But this person is the person who needs to help you.
Preach.
I know.
I mean,
that's
we need to go ahead and make that a bumper sticker. Like, their skills don't take away from me, because I think that's the whole thing. It's not a race. It's not a competition. It's not a merit badge situation. And for so many of us, that's how we conceptualize it. Like, oh no, if I actually give credit to this person, then obviously it means that I'm an imposter.
Right. There's days where, today I cleaned myself up. I put on a little pretty face, and I did things, and I was like, "Ooh, look at me! I look so cute." But there's gonna be days where you get me, and you're like, "I just took off my sunglasses, and there's nothing on this face, and I got a coffee in one hand and a pink lemonade in the other." As I speak. But it's also in that authenticity that it allows your client to be authentic, and get to go into these really deep places with people when you say, let's see where we go, and I'm going to be present, and I'm going to be available. And I'm sorry that I don't look like the cooking, I don't have a spectacular private practice office. My artwork isn't phenomenal. I just like looking at it, my couch isn't remarkable, but it's got my favorite colors. Like if I'm going to be in that space, I need to be comfortable, and I want it to be comfortable for my client. But I'll see some of these offices and I'm like, oh man, like mine don't look like that. And then I'm like, but that's not you.
Exactly.
That's not you. You've never been into, designing carpet and making things look like I'm gonna walk in 2 minutes before you did. I'm gonna say, all right, let's get to work. What are we doing?
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're highlighting there is something that so many people need to hear, which is people aren't going to come back because of the couch. Like I don't want to discount that there are people out there that have amazing offices and
I want them to make my house. Like
exactly. It's like, am I going to get my feelings, or is this HGTV? Like, is this Property Brothers? Like, what's going on here? But at the same time, sometimes as clinicians, we will discount what we bring in the fire of who we are to the session. Oh no, I need that bigger couch. I need to have that pretty picture. I need to have the perfect lighting. I need the perfect space.
Or even the opposite, where we'll make fun of their nice stuff because I'm insecure or because I don't feel like, well, I'm just going to pick on you so that I don't have to look at mine because I did it. I'm just saying we all have a place at the table.
Lilia's brewing a fresh cup of tea over there. I'm
going to love the fact that, and I have colleagues that are, they post pictures of their offices and I'm like, wow, that is beautiful. That is some wonderful space. And then it goes back to like, yeah, I'm okay with me. Yeah, I'm okay with my space. My space is cool. Or sometimes every now and then I might be like, ooh, I do want that. Like that I do want. One of my colleagues in my private practice just got us my favorite trophy. It's a thumbs up. That's all it is. A thumbs up trophy. And I love it because I'm like, that's the epitome of how I feel sometimes with my clients. You got it. You got this. Right? I'm like, it's not the best anything. It's just thumbs up, man. We made it today.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, so Lilia, you said that a lot of people find you word of mouth, but as we wrap this podcast up, how do people find you if they have sat down and been like, you know what, Lilia is my cup of tea. This is who I want to be with. How do they find you?
I do have an email where I could get reached. It's Dr. Lilia for Change at gmail.com. I don't, because of the population that I work with, I am very kind of private in terms of, my location, just because I really have to honor a lot of the little kids that gotten hurt and stuff like that. So I tend to kind of manage things a little bit, but you can also find me on Instagram. I got that one. It's like I think it's dr.lilia_for_change.
And we'll have these linked on the description. That way that people can find you. So again, if you're listening on the podcast, you can always go to SessionWell's channel on YouTube. We have the video up and we have all this information on being able to find her. But I would just want to say thank you so much for being willing to sit and spend some time with us, Lilia.
It was so nice having you.
Thanks for having me too. Thanks just for being yourself. Like, I think that's the part I like the most, is just these honest, authentic conversations about being human and trying to do some good work for people we care about. So thank you. Thank you for the space, because in honoring it, it allows us to hopefully offer some to those around us. So thank you.
And I truly appreciate everything that you brought today, because I could feel myself being nudged in certain ways.
Oh, me
you
too.
You are infectious with your optimism, but I just loved the bit that you closed on, which is your space that you do therapy in is a reflection of you, and it's comfort and it's comfortable. I feel like so many of us, we forget about that, because like literally my therapy practice is the background that you see. I'm all virtual. And I remember beating myself up because I'd get those calls. Oh, well, I only want to do it in person. It's like, man, can I afford a $4,000 a month lease right now? Is that what I want to do? And then it's just, well, no, what do you do well? let's work on the strengths, not just what you don't have at the moment.
But don't forget, Adam, your smile, your eye contact, that is your space. That is still you. You know, so you can have those beautiful mountains behind you. You can have curtains, you can have a dollhouse like I do, but you know, and this is one of my other offices. But let me tell you, it is you. At the end of the day, every ounce of research says it's the relationships you build and the fact that you care. And if you can demonstrate that, then you can help someone along. So
absolutely.
Just another nugget for the road. Well, thank you so much, Lilia, for sitting down with us. Again, for all of you that tuned in, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on your drive into work or home or wherever, we appreciate you so greatly. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you for the messages. Again, if you ever have someone or something that you want to hear on SessionWell and you want to break apart a conversation, send us an email, send us a comment, and let us have the ability to try to have a conversation that maybe you've been wrestling with. So thank you again, and you guys all have a wonderful day. Music in this podcast is sourced through filmmusic.io. The featured track is Energetic Upbeat by Winnie the Mood, Creative Commons license 4.0. This podcast is copyrighted by SessionWell 2021, all rights reserved.